Welcome. I'm Mary Lou Hulis, a spiritual leader of New Beginning Oneness Center in Tarpon Springs, and we are interviewing some of the most enlightened pioneers around the planet, and we have one of those with us today, Bill Murphy, who is the author of Driving with the Brakes On, and Bill has just finished a book called The Metaphysical Trader, which will be out midsummer. So let me just tell you a little bit about Bill. Bill has been a student of metaphysics and on a spiritual path for over 40 years. And he's been a commercial pilot, a professional skier, and he's developed an interest in the financial market in 1983. He's also kind of ventured behind the veil to what's going on in our world and really seeing how government, finances, and things like that work. So let me introduce Bill Murphy. So glad to have you on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
And we've entitled this program The Metaphysical Trader, which I think is so interesting because we would never think about the stock market as something metaphysical, Bill. So let me begin asking you, what is metaphysics?
Well, the metaphysics is basically a branch of philosophy
that
deals with very first principles. It deals with being, it deals with abstract concepts of being, knowing, time, identity, causes of things like that, things that are generally not seen. And there's another theory that calls it talk about things with no basis in reality.
Right.
Which is,
kind of that field underneath the physical that's really the reality of everything.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, then you get into the whole idea about what is reality.
Exactly. And let me ask you, what is reality, Bill?
Well, that really depends on who you ask. There's
Yes.
a common idea of reality. It would depend on who it is you're talking about, who you're asking. But it can be, usually the agreed upon definition is reality is stuff you can see, you can touch, you can perceive with your five senses. And that is one definition, but it's very limited, because if you get into some of these other things which you can't see or touch, for example, the visible light spectrum, you get into the visible light spectrum, what we can see is a very, very small percentage of the actual total light spectrum. Same thing with sound and vibration. Dogs and cats and other animals can hear vibrations we can't hear. Does that mean that they're not real?
Exactly.
And of course they're real. It's just that we can't perceive it. So if you get into a definition of reality, well, what's reality? It's only what we can see and what we can prove. That's a very limited idea, and I think it really leads you down kind of a bad path, because what happens is there's so many things that can't be seen. Love can't be seen. Intuition can't be seen. Are they not real? Well, of course they're real.
Exactly.
And so if you're trying to limit yourself to these concepts, and if we're spiritual beings and we have all these abilities outside of the physical body, then basically what happens is you're saying, well, if you can't see it or touch it, then it isn't real. And it's like trying to measure a non-physical thing using physical parameters just doesn't work. It's just stupid.
Right.
So.
And on a real practical scale, when we see a rainbow, we're looking through a prism and we're really seeing something that's around us all the time, because
Right.
we're encircled with all, the spectrums of light all the time, but we only see that rainbow when water's there and we're looking through a prism. So that's really what, right now we're sitting in a field of light, aren't we?
Exactly.
So that's what you're talking about. And really, I think where we're going today is we're learning that the invisible realm is really much more real than the five senses and the realms that we've been living in the world today.
Exactly.
And we're beginning to really tap into those fields, those fields that are so much real. So let me ask you, you spoke about the concept of a morphic field and a morphogenetic field. Briefly, what is that, Bill?
Okay, well, morphic field or morphogenetic or morphogenic field is basically a field of information.
Okay.
And this is a term that was coined by Rupert Sheldrake, who has a PhD in biochemistry from Cambridge. And he's a philosopher, but he's also, a hard scientist.
Yes.
And he came up with this idea, and he has all kinds of things on his website and he's written a lot of books about it too, about this concept. But it has to do with, my definition of it, and the simplified definition is, it's basically a field of information that exists because of what's existed before. In other words, it exists in the ether. in the
Oh, wow.
field. So,
Yes.
and that's what he discovered, is that cells kind of knew how to be cells from earlier cells, and information that was within themselves but also without themselves. So basically, we are all in a field of information, and I write about this in my first book, and Greg Braden's talked about it, and
Right.
many other philosophers have talked about it,
Right.
where things are perceived on some level that can't really be explained through mechanical communication. So it
Yes.
has to do with what surrounds us.
Well, how does that affect us today? How does this morphic field, in our everyday life, how does that affect us? How would you say that influences us? Let's say it that way, influences us.
Well, we're exposed to information. If you take a look at all the information that's flying around in the sky, like if we had our smartphones here, we could watch a movie. Well, that information is flying around right now. So we are perceiving that on some level,
Right.
And so morphogenic field this is another definition which I really like. It says there's mounting evidence that as more and more people learn how to do something, it becomes easier for others to learn it or do it.
Right.
And I've seen this, you see this firsthand with sports.
4-minute
No
mile.
one-
The 4-minute mile.
Exactly.
Yes.
No one broke the 4-minute mile
Right.
until Jim Ryan broke the 4-minute mile, and then now people do it all the time. Same thing with gymnastics, sports, especially freestyle the aerial event. When I was just getting started with freestyle skiing, and you look at what they're doing now, it's fantastic.
Yes.
And yet there's all these people that can do it. So because it's out there, and this is kind of gets into the 100th monkey
Beautiful.
thing too, because it's that information is there, so we're receiving it on some level.
And that 100 monkey is really what gives us hope today, isn't it? As we begin to wake up and we get that tipping point of that 100th monkey, we're going to really transform our world, and that's really what we're all looking for today. I think that's why there's so much exposure today, that we're
Yep.
looking behind the scenes of government, pharmaceuticals, and all of these companies, because as people get enlightened, it raises our consciousness. So we're looking for that tipping point, and we're bringing in that field of we, aren't we, instead of just you and me. So it's a great time to be alive. So what is the idea of the metaphysical trader? When I met you, Bill, and you said that the stock market was metaphysical and had a consciousness, I thought, I want to know more about that. You say that the stock market has a consciousness?
The stock market is consciousness. It's also computers, it's also dollars and cents, it's money, it's things moving around. But what is it for? What is it doing? Why is it there? It's
Yes.
all people. And people and their ideas about what should happen, what shouldn't happen, what they want to happen, what they don't want to happen. So all of that gets composed into this giant field of consciousness, and the market is consciousness. You watch TV, you watch any of these commentators, they talk about the market, they say, well, the market went up today, the market thinks that, blah, blah, blah. It's like, the market thinks, the market has an
Wow.
opinion, the market feels,
Yes.
and that's because of it's a morphic field. It's people connected to it
Wow.
with certain interests, and so that's kind of the whole idea about the metaphysical trader. If you are able to move outside yourself and move outside the money aspect of it, and the fact that that's your money sitting there or whatever, you'll make better decisions. Because you'll be more plugged into. You'll have a different look about what it is you're doing.
Well, can we tap into it intuitively then? I mean, is this a field that we can intuitively, when you're saying it like that, I'm thinking to myself, can we tap into that intuitively then?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
You can. The tough part about it, and this is another angle in the metaphysical trader, the really tough part about doing that is that there's emotion.
That can change it radically, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
And your emotion can cloud your true feelings about something.
Oh, I see. Right.
And
right.
Yoda talks about that
Yeah.
in Star Wars.
Right.
Because it does. It's very, money is very, very close to us in this society. It's totally equated with survival.
Yes.
And so people are very emotional about it, and it's a huge factor. Fear of that is a huge factor in the way people operate, the way they think, what they do, and all of that stuff. And in the market's very pronounced. And I was a trader. I worked, for two money management companies, so I was a trader for a long time. in addition to just being on my own. I was a trader and an analyst. And you could see, you can actually begin to feel these things as they're starting to happen. And if you watch the market enough, you get to understand what it is that's going on and some of the forces that are going on, and you can see them on your screens when you're sitting in front of your screens.
So it's almost like that we can look at the stock market and kind of see the consciousness of humanity and where it is, the way you're saying. I mean, we can really see where, kind of tap into what's happening with the consciousness of humanity through the stock market.
There are pieces of that, you know, and if you look at the consciousness of humanity, that is so huge, because it's like, what piece of humanity is connected? But the thing is, we are all connected. It is all one big field. And if you took a rock and threw it into a quiet lake, the ripples would go out. You know, this is an old martial arts concept, and those ripples go out. So everything that we do and everything that we feel has some influence on the overall field.
Absolutely. I totally believe that. What's the stock market there for? I mean, what is that really teaching us? What do you think it's teaching us?
Well, I don't know that it's really teaching us anything, but I think actually it can. And I think, depending on your viewpoint of it, it can be a total road to self-mastery, just like anything else. If you were a gymnast, you would want to perfect your emotion. You would want to perfect your ability to perform under pressure and not be afraid of what happened if you fell off the balance beam. The same thing happens with almost any field of endeavor. So for me, the metaphysical trader is about learning enough and using the market, and that's what I've decided that I've done for a long time, is try to master my own emotions and my own feelings about things and my own ability to observe.
Right.
And use that as a road to self-mastery. So if the market can teach us anything, it's how to master our own emotions and how to master really a tool that's just flowing money all day long, one way or the other, and you got to just figure out how to get a net out there and grab something. Right?
Well, let me ask you, what's happening? Because I heard, the market's down right now. What's happening, do you think, on the world scene with the stock market today?
Oh, man, there's so many things that are happening in the market today, and we are basically, what's happening right now is that we are at the end of a very long-term period of expansion that was built on credit.
Exactly.
So countries are borrowing money. Countries have borrowed money from their citizenry, and the whole market has been pushed up for years and years and years because of this. The expansion that's been fueled, and that gets into a whole different thing. So people, right now, the central banks of all the major countries are printing money and holding their markets up and trying not to default on things. So you have all those forces, and then there are people that just want to retire and live off the interest or live off dividends and things like that. So you have all these different parties that have different interests, and there are people that want to just control everything, and there are people that do control quite a bit.
That's
of
for sure.
Absolutely. The market
sure.
is manipulated. It has been. It's not that hard. When you sit on a trading desk, you can see how it could be done, And it's,
well, would you advise people to keep in? You said we've been in a time of expansion. Does this mean we're coming into a time where it's not going to be expanding anymore? I mean, maybe it would be better for people to pull out of the market. I mean, what's your advice on that?
It's like, it's always, I don't give financial advice per se. I kind of instruct on some of the things to observe and things like that. But my feeling is that you should always be somewhat in there. There are always going to be opportunities in every market. And yes, I feel we could be coming in. Basically what happens, if you take a look at what happens if somebody borrows and borrows and borrows and borrows at some point.
Right.
That they borrowed more than they can ever pay back, then what are the only things that can happen?
Well, they hit pay dirt, don't they? They hit bottom and...
Yeah, they can either not pay it back, or they can figure out a way to pay it back. But if it's so ridiculous it can't be paid back, they're not going to pay it back. So then what? Well, those debts get washed away, and we start over, right? Well, what about all the money that you owed to other people? What happens to them, And so there'll be a period of readjustment. If you take a look at what happened in Japan, they have a market, the Nikkei Dow, which is like the Japanese Dow market, and it was up around 40,000 back in the 80s, and it's never gotten even back to half of that. So if people are piling in right now to the market, And this gets into like the difference between trading and investing. If you're piling into the market when it's very expensive, and I feel that it is somewhat expensive right now, it's gotten a little bit cheaper, but you have to just take a look at what value is. And this is why the more you learn about the market and the opportunities that are there, you'll be able to take advantage of those.
Right. And that leads me into, what is the difference between trading and investing? That's another question I wanted to ask you.
Well, they have many similarities, but they have many differences. The biggest difference is with investing, somebody is investing, like Warren Buffett invests. He goes and he buys a business that he likes, like Dairy Queen, okay? Mm-hmm. He says they're going to be there forever, so he buys the business, and he wants to be a partner in that business. An investor is a partner in a business.
That's a way of looking at it, right?
And it's a good thing to do when you partner with businesses that are willing to share their profits with you, like they pay dividends or things like that. So an investor tends to be somebody who is buying or purchasing shares in a company, or purchasing the company because they like the business, they want to be there no matter what happens. So as they go up and down, the economy goes up and down, they're not leaving. They believe in Coca-Cola or Procter & Gamble or any of these other companies, and they're not going to stop being invested. A trader tends to work on shorter or very short time frames, and so they're in it for a move in the stock. And I think that every investor should have an element of trader in them, in as much as they can recognize when something has become very expensive. And an investor tends to look at the fundamentals of a company, like whereas a trader would look at more like, what's it doing right now?
Right. So it's like a day trader. I've heard that term, day trader. Is that what is that, a day trader?
A day trader is somebody who's usually in and out of a position within one day, sometimes many times during a day.
So they're really like watching it on their computer all day long.
Oh yeah, and they're trading for very small pieces of profit. Mm-hmm. Whereas an investor doesn't care about that. They just go, this stock is cheap because it had a bunch of tailwinds for a while, and people don't think it's a good place to have your money now, so they sold it, and now the price is about half of what it was 6 months ago or a year ago. Mm-hmm. But they're still financially strong. They're growing. They're changing what they're doing to be more, more in the present day. And we figure that that's going to be, it takes money to build a new factory or do something like that. So what they're doing is they're expanding for the future, and that will turn out well because they've always done that in the past, and they've done well doing that in the past. Mm-hmm. So a trader is not so much interested in that as like, okay, is there something that's happened with this company that is causing their stock to go back up or will cause it to go down? In other words, did they change something in what they're doing so that it will cause the stock price to be affected over a relatively short period of time? Mm-hmm. A trader is interested in sometimes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a day, 2 weeks, a month or two,
right,
and everywhere in between. Right. So there are all kinds of different traders. But they have the idea that they're not married to the position. They're not going to stay there for the rest of their lives.
It's not for the long run. It's not for the long run. But let me ask you a question, though. We've been hearing about, there's going to be a reset on the financial and the banking and all of that. Do you think there's coming a reset with the stock market, too?
Well, nobody really has a crystal ball.
Right.
Nobody really knows. I think that there will be, because if you take a look at, the earlier example I gave about debt, it's like, what happens when you have too much debt? What happens? This is basically what occurs. And I'll just do a quick analogy. When we had the housing crisis and stuff, there's a great movie on it called The Big Short.
The Big Short. Okay.
That's a movie that's really kind of goes through what happened.
Uh-huh.
But the basics are that somebody buys a house, the house goes up an insane amount of value in 6 months, and they decide, well, I could go get a second mortgage on this house because my house has gone up $50,000 in value. I could take that money, I could buy a new truck, I could buy a swimming pool, I could buy whatever. And that's exactly what happened. You had people that could buy a house with very little money down, buying a house and having it go up because everybody thought, well, real estate can never go down, right? So then what happens is all this money is now sloshing out into the economy, and people are building new factories to build stuff to supply those people that are buying stuff with the money that they wouldn't buy under normal circumstances. So what happens is you get this expansion that takes place that's not really based on reality.
It's really something that's been forced.
Yeah.
And it's not based, and it's not undergirded with money either.
Right.
Right.
It's built on, it's a
Yeah.
house of cards, and sooner or later
Right.
that comes. So when that happens, yeah, the market will go down, and it can go down really big and really hard, and it can go down for a couple of years at a time. But companies will readjust to that. They will recalibrate themselves. They will figure out, good managements figure out how to actually, okay, the scenery's changed, so now what do I do? Good managements always figure that out. And that's, so there'll be opportunities.
And I know a lot of people have made big bucks when the market goes down. I mean, there's a way to do that. Well, let me ask you this.
There is a way to
Yes. How do beginners use this information to invest? How would you, bring a beginner into this? Because I really don't know that much about, investing. So how would you advise somebody that's just beginning?
Well, the beginner, I think the best thing to do is just start on the internet. But be advised that, everybody, in fact, I did this when getting ready for this interview. I went out and Googled, what's the best way to start investing? And the first thing you get is a full page of people selling you on their stuff. And that's okay. Everybody has to sell something, right? But the best thing is to figure out, have a goal. Why am I getting into investing? I want to make more money. I want to build for retirement. I have kids that are going to go to college, and I'll need that money. So what are your goals? That's the best place to start, is why am I doing this? And then what you should do is start looking at different ways, like the stock market versus the bond market. And typically what happens is a person that's investing will go out and they'll look, buy Money Magazine or something like that, and they'll look and they'll see ads for different things like precious coins or precious metals or, all these other things. And basically what'll happen is the beginner doesn't necessarily know that all of those things have a place, but they might not be the place for them at the time. So all these things have a place in a portfolio.
Kind of be diversified is what you're saying.
Yeah, to be diversified, but understand what it is you're doing. Understand.
Yes.
So basically, just begin reading.
Okay.
There are some really good resources. AAII, that's the American Association for Individual Investors. You could go to their website and learn a ton of things without ever buying a membership. The membership's only, I think it's under $30 a year. And then just begin with an educational process from people that are not necessarily selling one thing and saying, this is why you have to buy annuities or whatever. Annuities have a place. They,
Right.
I sold annuities at one time, and they have a very definite function, and they're good at very specific things, but they don't do everything well, and they do some things very poorly. So you need to know that.
Let me ask you another question. This is just a personal question that I'd like to know. Is this a good time to be investing in silver and gold? Do you think that's part of a portfolio that's, valuable? And is this a good time to be buying that?
I think that it is. I don't feel like you need to go all out in it, but here's the fact. The fact is, money, if you look at a dollar bill right now, and that gets into a whole nother interview
Right.
about the Federal Reserve,
Right.
really at its essence, any money, anywhere, all it is an idea backed by some sort of confidence. There's confidence that somebody, if you take that money, you're confident you'll be able to take that and go buy bread with it or something like that, right? So once that confidence is gone, then that money isn't worth anything. So historically, we've always come back to something which has intrinsic value. It can be used for something else. Gold and silver can be used for other things. Silver especially, it's used in everything. It's used in electronics and jewelry and everything else, and gold is too. So it has an intrinsic value that historically people have always trusted. So the confidence in gold can be destroyed by central governments and propaganda campaigns and things like that. But the whole rest of the world knows that gold and silver are in fact money, because they have value outside of a piece of paper.
Yes. And I was reading, I was watching a special on television where it said Fort Knox, really, the gold isn't there anymore. So really our dollar is not being backed up by that gold anymore, is it?
Our dollar hasn't been backed by gold for a long time.
Yes.
You know, and what is it exactly? What is it backing that exactly?
Exactly.
It's, you know, if you look at a dollar bill, it's actually a loan. It's been borrowed from the Federal Reserve.
Right.
You know, so
Yeah. And that is another subject, because we know with the Federal Reserve is really not our government, is it? It's
No.
owned by a family. So, you know, I always wondered what was this national debt that keeps growing and growing, and now we're all coming into the understanding is they took over printing our dollar bills many, many years ago and
long
charging
time
us so much more when they printed them. So our debt is growing because they keep, you know, printing the dollar with no gold behind it.
well, yeah, you know, and the basic thing there is they agreed. Congress let them come in and do. And this is what happens. Congress goes, we need $100 billion, and so the Federal Reserve goes, okay, well, we'll give you $100 billion and we'll charge you this much interest for it. So Congress has the right to print their own money via the Constitution. But instead, they let the Federal Reserve do it with the idea that they can control things better and not let it get out of hand.
And we
You
used
know.
to print our own money until the Federal
Right.
Reserve came in. Well, Bill, let me just ask you one last question. That field of finances is so large. What is the best way for us to really, I know you said we have to educate ourselves and get on some of these sites. What's the best way for us to begin investing? How did you begin investing?
I began investing by just setting up a brokerage account somewhere, and I would pick a brokerage account that is not affiliated with investment banking so much. Like if you take a look at Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, all these guys, Merrill Lynch, they all do investment banking, and that is they put money together for deals for companies that need to raise money, you know. So people like Schwab and Fidelity and Ameritrade, and I'm not recommending any of these, but look for a discount broker. Somebody who basically offers you, and they have tremendous amounts of resources, and they're not going to sell you stuff. They don't make their money from selling you things. They do have services, and they will make money from selling you things, but that's not why they're there. They're there to provide a service, and they have a tremendous amount of resources.
How do we look for a discount broker? Would it be under discount broker?
You can go on and Google discount brokers.
Okay.
You know, but I'll tell you right now that Charles Schwab, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, Scottrade, there's a whole list of them. You know, I look for somebody that's very liquid, that's not particularly involved, that is not involved in investment banking, you know, because I just feel like, for one thing, they charge less commissions. When I had money at a full service broker, they're called, you know, and I would make a trade, they would charge me $160, and you know, at Schwab it's $8 or $9. You know,
That's a big difference.
It's a big difference.
Big difference. So that's
But
a
they'll
great
also
piece of
tell
advice.
you, yeah, but they'll also tell you, like the first guys, you know, they tell you should be buying this and you should be buying this, and well, who are you going to buy it from? You're going to buy it from them. So I think you really need to keep yourself independent and separate, and you can do it, but set up a brokerage account somewhere, you know, one of these places, and you can do it with not that much money, you know, and then start going onto their websites and learning about the different ways to invest. They have all these workshops and things you can do for free, and I think that's a great way to educate yourself before you start playing a game that you don't really know what it is and what the rules are. That's a big deal.
And that's really what your book is all about, isn't it?
My book-
Really helping people to learn how to invest. So that's your heart, is really to educate people how to step into the stock market and begin to invest with
Yeah.
some information.
Exactly, and my original intent behind it was like, God, my kids are not really interested in this, but you know, what do they do with their money? They need to know this. So I've had all this experience. I've had like 30 years or more of experience in learning, reading, and I'm watching my screens, you know, 6 screens at a time. You learn stuff. I wanted to just do, you know, a brain dump and just get all of that into a place where my kids and others could read it
Right.
and learn what I've learned, benefit from my my experience
Right.
and kind of knock off some of the detours that I took that weren't all that great.
Well, thank you, Bill. And look for Bill's book out. It's going to be out mid-summer, The Metaphysical Trader, which I love the name of that book. And I
Thank you.
really enjoyed interviewing you. We're going to have Bill's information on the screen after the program. And thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.